Hey, welcome everybody. I'm going to get started. I'm going to stop looking up because it's pretty high. And I can't really see very much out there with the bright lights here. But thank you for coming to my session. This session is about Playwright, and it's mostly about Playwright and scaling the Playwright tests up in the cloud using the Microsoft Playwright testing service. But we have to have a journey to get there. I've also added a couple other tidbits to the slide deck. Like the previous talk, I added some things in for the slide deck for you to get later. I'm going to try to get all this done in 45 minutes, see what we can do. And because of the lack of connectivity to the internet, I also want to say that I put these demos and things in a slide deck. Not to mention, you get the slide deck later, you can see how I did it, kind of thing like that. So my name's Randy Pagels. I am a DevOps architect and a GitHub trainer at Zebia. Zebia's consulting service worldwide. I'm out of the US, so I do a lot of Microsoft consulting services. I do a lot of training on Copilot and advanced security, building content for GitHub and things like that. So me and my coworkers all do this wonderful stuff in the US. I am based out of north of Detroit, so it was a short drive to get here. Columbus is awesome to be here. Hey, hit me up on LinkedIn if you ever want to connect. Know anything on Playwright-wise or again, Copilot Advanced Security, that's what I do. So would love to connect. So the agenda is really quite simple. We'll just quickly review some testing challenges and some goals that we have in the testing frameworks. We also want to look at the Playwright getting started, really briefly getting started, because we could spend an hour doing that and we don't have an hour. So I want to really get to the rest of that talk, which is the continuous integration testing. Once you have your tests set up, what does that look like to run them continuously, right, with every check-in? And then we scale it up using the Azure Playwright service. So how many people here today are using Playwright at all? Just if I can see any hands. Well, a little bit. How about anybody have heard of the Microsoft Playwright testing service? I don't see any hands. All right, good. Show you something new. So that's what we're going to talk about. That's the idea. So UI challenges. Anybody's done testing before? Testing is hard. Testing takes time to learn. Testing is it's very manual, of course, right? It's slow. If you have a lot of big battery of tests to run, every time there's a deployment and you're the QA person or the QA team, you have to run through these manual tests. So, of course, that's what we want to avoid. Tests that you're automating, they get flaky after a while. If something changes or gets tweaked, that test fails, and then you're chasing that test. They're very brittle sometimes with these apps. If the component's not where you think it was last time, these tests break. So these are the testing challenges nowadays. So what does it look like in the future, or I'll say present time now? The idea with this is very simple goals. Let's make it easy. Let's make testing fun. If you're an app dev person designing an app, it's nice to run through the iteration of testing as well. Make it painless as possible. Making the tools very integrated. So VS Code is what we're going to use today. But VS Code is making those tools integrated and easy to go through test cycles. And after that, I want it very, very easy to set it up for my CI/CD pipeline as well. And then, obviously, we want to go at scale as well. There's limitations with running tests locally. There's even limitations running tests on GitHub workflows or Azure DevOps pipelines. There's only so many runners and so many threads to try to parallelize those tests. So we're going to end with that. So some of these test automation practices, these best practices, is be able to rerun the test at any time. That's one of those best practices. Make sure we can run these in the CI/CD pipeline. Each test will reset itself and run as independent. Each test should be run independently. One of the pro tips here is don't automate every test. I've seen that in the past where someone takes all their manual tests and tries to automate every one of them. Go for the ones with the biggest ROI and automate those. Biggest bang for the bucks. The old Azure DevOps team, the Microsoft DevOps team, wrote a lot of automation tests to test the Azure DevOps service. Anybody using DevOps service today? Azure DevOps? How about test plans? Azure DevOps test plans? Okay. At least heard of it. How about we heard of it? Because, okay. The Azure DevOps team uses the Azure DevOps to do deployments, is funny enough. And then running tests in parallel is important as well. So this is an eye chart purposely, but a gal on the developer advocate team in Microsoft built this and just sketched it out. I thought it was cool. Again, for reference later for you. But it does bring up a few good points if you do get the slide deck, you can zoom in here. The idea is this making testing very easy through an API. Playwright does that very well. Making it very, can almost read that. Making tests very resilient, so using asynchronous await Very easy to do that with Playwright as well. There's no trade-off or limits using Playwright. And I'm an old Selenium tester, by the way. I used to use Selenium before Playwright came out. Tests should be run in full isolation, so every instance gets its own browser context, which is awesome and very, very fast. And then there's a bunch of powerful CLI tooling that comes with it. I'm going to show you just a couple of those things because we have limited time today. But anyway, that's in the slide deck for you. High-level view of overview of Playwright itself, cross-browser. So you can actually install it and run it across Chrome, Firefox, WebKit for mobile development. Cross-language. I'm using TypeScript now. I think it's the richest, but you can also convert and use C# and Java, Python, etc. And then cross-platform again. The Playwright will run across any of the platforms. Modern asynchronous API, so I can use await sync, so they're not so brittle. Now, if the component doesn't show up because there's a pop-up or let's say a delay on the website, Playwright will wait for it, which is nice. It's a nice, and then the rich elements, so I can actually, in the code editor, go through the different elements of testing, so I can actually find them. Playwright provides some good tools for that. There is the screenshot recording. So when you get a bug, if something fails, it's nice to get the screenshot of what failed. Maybe even the video recording if you turn that on. So again, Playwright just does that naturally, which is nice as well. And again, full isolation. So separate browser instance for each, which is important. The architecture is quite simple. We have the language bindings, and then we have one single API layer that we can hit. Again, no matter what language you use, it's the same call, which is nice. Getting started is quite simple. Again, I would normally install it for you, but I've already pre-installed it because of I don't have connectivity. I would suggest using Visual Studio Code. There's a really good Playwright extension. Install that extension. What's nice is the extension will install the tools. It'll install a example test, for you. It'll install a CI/CD pipeline for you. It does not a lot for installing it. It'll ask you which browsers you want and things like that. And then we install Playwright itself. Usually Chrome and Firefox are top of the list there. And then running the test is quite simple. I can run them from the command line. If you have a test extension in your Visual Studio Code, I'll show you that today. You can actually run it that way. And what's nice is you can actually run the test right in the editor itself. You don't have to go to Test Explorer if you don't want to, but you could. I put some links in the bottom here as I came up with some these slides. So keep that in mind. Let's look at a few things in the time we have here. This will be interesting to see how this shows up. Does that need to be increased in font size, by the way? In the back, yes? Did I hear yes? A little better? Okay. I won't be in here long. This is the extension you want to install. Go to the extensions in VS Code. Obviously, just type in Playwright, and you can go ahead and install that. So once it's installed, if you do Command P, there's an install Playwright. If I don't want to click it because I'm not connected, again, that will install the Playwright components you need. Once it's done, what you end up with is this. You'll get a test file. You'll get a CI/CD pipeline file, already pre-configured for GitHub workflows, which is nice. You'll get a sample test. So provide some tests you can just run right off the bat, so you can feel good about the install. And the other thing you get is this Test Explorer here, this Playwright piece at the bottom. So I'll zoom in on this purposely. What you can do with this, these tools are built in. So I can record a test new, right? I can have the recorder running, go to a website, and it'll create the code for me as I'm clicking around. So I don't have to guess at that. I can do assertions from there as well. If I have time, I'll show that right now. I can do things like pick my browsers. I only installed Chrome to make this easy. And then show browsers. So what does this look like if I run a test? I can go run test over here in my Test Explorer if you have this running. I have 3 of them sitting here. I'm going to try to make this where I can show both. Let's see if that will work. It actually should just work. So in the Test Explorer allows me to run a test, a set of tests, a specific test. I can run a test suite as I'm building these tests, and there's different tools and ways to do that. If you're interested in this, I would definitely recommend looking into this more. If I run these tests, I have the browser box checked on the lower left corner. It should launch the browser for me, and nothing will happen because I forgot to run the app. So let's go do that again. I jumped ahead, got excited. Yeah. Here, I just have a very simple Python app, by the way. And when I say simple, this is a task tracker app, right? We can put tasks, we can keep track of our little tasks. That's all it is. So now if I go back and try to rerun this, let's do this again. It works much better if you actually have the app running. You'll see it launch. It actually went so fast it wasn't even open, so let's just try that again. It's not running it because it's already launched. It's sitting over here. Again, it's hard to do on this one big screen here, but understand it's actually launched and runs this. Now, what's interesting here is if I run a test, so I have one test here. Let me get rid of this code. And if I want to look for an element, let's say. So if this was actually let's say get started. I could run the test in the editor. So I'm in the actual editor running the one test. And it's connected to the browser instance that ran the test in the first place, which is over here. So if I come back and say star, let's just say I'm looking for something, an element containing the text star, and I run that. Again, I'm sliding these around a little bit here. Let's try it one more last time. For some reason, it's not finding a problem, which is good. It's supposed to find a problem. That's okay. I'm going to close it. I'm going to move on to the next piece here. So another thing I want to show you in the browser is in the code editor here, you can see you have a little green check mark. This is the tool. This is the extension. I can actually run these individually, which is nice. I can just run them individually, or I can come over to the Test Explorer and run them all at the same time. It does provide debugging, so I could actually put a breakpoint here. I can say add a breakpoint here. I could right-click on the test itself and say, hey, debug the test. And what will happen, it'll stop, and then I can basically visualize and look at my different elements of the page itself. Once it kicks up the debugger. So here I can actually go to the page. It's hard to see, but I'll zoom in best I can. It actually stops where I debugged it and said, here's what I see. Here's what Playwright's seeing in that element. If I go over to the code and zoom in here as well, again, I can hover over these different elements inside the editor, and it'll provide me more basically context about what's sitting there. So debugging in Playwright is quite simple as well. I'm going to stop that. It's not liking it at all. The other thing I wanted to show you is generating tests. Now, this is one of the tools that gets installed under Playwright. There's a Record New button. If you can't read it very well, it's Record New. And you'll see the test opened up. If I go to look at the code on the left, it opens up a window. And what I'm going to try to show you is as I'm clicking around, so if I type in the app itself, whatever the URL is going to be, normally this just pops up. I'm surprised it didn't. What I'm showing you is as I'm testing the app and recording new, the code is being generated for me. So if I come in here and say, you know, just add a task, feed the cat, whatever. Do the shopping. I'm just adding tasks, spelling it right. I'm completing a task. I'm going to hit filters. I could come in here and say, I want to assert a specific value. The value pops up and says, are you looking for a 1? I want to make sure the text is right. It makes it super easy to add asserts if that's what I want. I say, yeah, that's cool. And then when you're done, you just basically close the window. And what you have is the code. So this is the Playwright test that was generated by just clicking around. I don't have to guess at things, right? Now I can record at cursor. I can put my cursor near, say, oh, I forgot something, and insert more code here. So that's really simple to get started, is recording brand new. There's a couple tools I want to show you that you can actually use as well. So one thing I wanted to show, let me get out of this. If I go back into, notice I'm actually hard-coded in the URL. And what you can do, I'm going to show you the difference between these two. Cancel that. There we go. I want to, let's see, I want to bring this other file in. One thing about Playwright, you have to have the test ends in spec dot whatever the language is in TS in this example. So I have a test file here with a lot more tests in it. I moved the wrong one. Let me get that out of there. Here we go. And what I want to show you is at the very top, I'll zoom in again. There's two things that are really cool to have in Playwright. The before all and the before each. So before all the tests, I go to reset. It goes to the home page. Notice the click is just the post, reset. And then I do a before each, so I can actually go to the root. Now, you might be wondering where all that comes from. There is a config file that Playwright installs. It's important. I'll zoom in on that. We can see it better. This is the default config. It's called the playwright.config.ts. And where you can figure out that you can configure the timeouts of the page. I can configure the test directory, which is called test for me. And then I can install a base URL. So I don't have to call the URL. If I change it one time for all my tests, I only have to change it in one spot. Again, base URL. And then I have a trace file. So it does on first retry, it will do a second retry of the test itself if it fails. And of course, I can pick the browsers I want. As I showed you, I only have Chrome installed to make it easier. But I could have put Firefox and different things. Supports Safari, Edge, etc. But this file is important, and it's going to become more important as we move forward. So let me go ahead and kick that. I want to show you just a couple commands that I can show you at the command line. Whoops. I don't know what happened here. Oh, there we go. So you can run the test from a command line. So I created many different tests here. You can see it actually running. If I zoom in a little bit. And again, I'm running them. This is 19 tests running on 5 workers here locally. But I can locally test my changes before I check my code in, which is nice. I can iterate over this. I can capture screenshots and video recordings. If there's something wrong with one of them that fails here, I can go ahead and look at that failure really, really fast as well. Whoops, wrong button. Let's go back. Here we go. Now, what's cool is one of the command lines is turning trace on. And with trace on, I can actually get a report of the results. And that report opens up for me automatically. Let me zoom in on this a little bit, make it easier. So this is a report that's just one of the tools that's built in. It's for the test run. And I can see very easily, I can just filter by the failed tests, by the past tests, and then I can look at all of them. If I want to drill into a failed test, it will bring me and show me the line of code that failed, give me some information on why it failed. So it's a nice HTML report. I can go down and look at the trace file here at the bottom. I can go into the trace file, which will open it up in a UI designed, it's a UI editor that Playwright built to allow me to play the test backwards and forwards and look at that. It's called trace. So that trace file gets built very, very easily with all the tests. Of course, as QA, I would probably only focus in on the failing test. They shouldn't fail, right? But it does. So that's called trace mode. And there's a lot of other CLI options. I want to make sure we don't get too far into the editor here. We could spend a lot of time on just Playwright itself. As you can see, a lot of tools here. I'm going to Control-C that. Whoops. All right, that was the reporter. One more tool, and then we'll jump back into slides. That tool is called UI mode. It's just --UI. I think it's like a really cool tool. So this is the UI mode. Now what UI mode is allows you to look at all your tests and actually lets you run the entire suite, just a specific set of tests. And UI mode is capturing screenshots, video recordings. It's capturing DOM information as it's going through. And this is something, if you have 2 screens, ideally, I'd put this on one screen, and I had a Visual Studio Code on the second screen. Now here I can look at a failing test, and at the very top they call this time travel. I can move my cursor across the top and see what the test was doing at that moment in time, and what the screen looked like at that moment in time. Now this passed, so it was supposed to, right? So if I go to a failing test, The other thing I can do in this UI mode is something like this. I can go down to the bottom, and you can see at the bottom showing me the steps that actually failed, shows me the actual code and the actual step that failed in the code. So UI mode captured all that for me, which is awesome. If I wanted to drill in this further and go see what the actual DOM looked like at that moment in time, you can actually pull the browser out like this. And of course, then we go into our tools. And as we hover over the DOM, we can actually walk through the different elements in the page at that moment in time. So it captured everything for me. Again, UI mode is probably one of my favorite tools here. Another thing I can do is watch test. There's a little, you probably can't see it very well. Let me try to zoom in here. There's a little eyeball next to each test. I could watch the test or watch the suite of tests. So if I click on that, now I have to go like this and pull in Visual Studio a little bit here. Hard to do on a big screen, but we'll do it anyway. The idea here is I can go into my code and make a change. I'll go back here. If I make a change to anything, as soon as I touch the code, you'll watch the test on the left, they run automatically. So it's auto-running Playwright test as I'm writing code, which is really nice now. Again, I have it on one screen. The tests are running constantly as I'm coding, and then I can fix it as I'm going along. So that's something that was pretty nice. Again, hard to show the synchronization, but point is Playwright syncing back with the actual code itself. Okay, let me go ahead and stop that. Go back to slides. All right, so I needed to show you kind of Playwright how it goes. There's a couple other things I'll sprinkle in the slide deck here. That trace file I collected, easy to share with others. Playwright does host, or Microsoft I should say, hosts this trace.playwright dev website. You can actually take that trace file and all its contents and upload it to the website, and then somebody else on your team could look at it and review it. So another nice little goodie there. Playwright also created an MCP, this Model Context Protocol. And in a nutshell, what this will allow you to do, it's basically the interface into Playwright APIs. So I can use Copilot now to say, hey, go out to this website URL and generate Playwright tests for me. And it'll use this context protocol for you to do that. Again, you can go to, there's a URL at the bottom. You can go to Playwright and actually install it. This is the GitHub repo. You can actually install this and play with it. That was something that was pretty awesome too. I haven't spent a lot of time with that. To make the rest of this demo a little more fun, we're going to talk about Contoso threads. And in a nutshell, they're just a startup company. They're basically selling merch, branded merch, and they have a lot of testing to go to make sure their website works very well. They're using this eShop on web example, and they want to automate the Playwright test to make sure they can scale is the idea here. So we're going to just see what they actually did. So let's go off and see exactly what they did. So the first step is the manual testing. Again, Azure DevOps test plans are test cases. We have test cases in different tooling. I'm using Azure DevOps test plans today, by the way. So automating the actual manual tests. Let's say we have lots and lots of manual tests. We want to automate those tests. And what do you get with that? We can actually automate them and link them to Playwright, which is really nice. With that, you get that end-to-end traceability. Did it fail? What's the screenshot looks like? The video recordings, of course. It actually updates the test run inside of Azure DevOps as well for me. And I can look at the history of the test run and execution. I can overall arching see which test is more likely to fail or how often is it failing, things like that. And the way that works, again, let's look at test plans and test suites first. So in Azure DevOps test plans, test plans, there is an actual test plan, which is, let's say, the parent. This is a high level. In the test plan itself, we can go ahead and view the success of this plan. How often is it run? It's about 72% pass rate on this particular one. And the test plan has multiple one or more test suites. Each test suite generally would focus on a specific type of operation for the business need, whatever is needed there. Maybe we're shopping by brand in this case. And each test suite has one or more test cases. And each of the test cases, of course, have the test steps. So we have this nice set of tests. Very key here is the test case ID is important. This is how we link a manual test to a Playwright automated test. We can actually look at the execution of the suite and see all the different outcomes here. So these are all passing just fine. And we can, if you notice, there's test configuration as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then I can actually cherry pick a specific test and look at its test run history. So if something's failing often, I would probably drill in here. This is a success story, so these are running just fine. And with test plans, you can actually configure them to run across different configurations, the test matrix. In this case, I created a test matrix for basically browser, Windows Edge, and of course, Windows 11 and Windows Edge. And then the idea there is I just have to create the test case one time, and I can run it across the test matrix and keep track of that. So now, once you have all those tests, of course, we have to export those tests. And the test cases would look, in test plans, you can actually throw them into a grid for editing for whatever reasons. I can drill and look at the test steps themselves, my expected results, et cetera, and basically just export that out to a CSV. And then I ask Copilot, do we have to put a little, who's using Copilot? Yeah. For fun, I ask Copilot to take the manual test cases I have, convert them into Playwright for me. So what's funny about that is I asked Copilot, how would I ask you to do this for me? In other words, create a prompt for me to do this for me. So Copilot did that. This is, without getting into too many details, this is an N-shot prompt, and Copilot basically said, okay, you're a testing assistant. Your job is to convert these test cases and using the CSV file, and I want them to automate a test using the Microsoft Playwright and use TypeScript. I could have said Java. I could have said C#, just for fun, right? And then I said, hey, each test case includes this test ID, the title, of course, and the steps. That's the first part of the prompt. Then Copilot continued and said, follow this approach. So basically using the Playwright runner, we want to do awaits. So we do the page clicks with awaits. I wanted basically name this test, this Playwright test, the same name as the test title, and then make sure that each Playwright test runs independently and very runnable. Again, this is just a prompt, by the way. And then, of course, the last part of this Copilot prompt is to provide an example. Copilot does really well with examples. So here's the test case example, test case ID 11185, and then here's the steps that are in the test case. Then what happened was Copilot, I ran that prompt and converted all my test cases into these files .spec.ts file. So these are the test cases it produced and all the steps that go with the Playwright in the language I told it to. Again, you could convert that and change it any way you like. So once we have the tests, I have another tool here from Alex Neo, and this is called the Playwright Azure Reporter. This is specific to Azure Test Plans to link a Playwright test to a test case by its ID. Very, very important. And what this does is when you run the Playwright tests, it will capture all the results. Pass, fail, video recordings, the screenshots, any of the steps that it broke, the code where it was, the DOM elements. This tool will help you connect these things together, which is pretty awesome. Again, lower left corner, without going into it too deeply. And then it's time to set up our CI/CD pipeline. So this continuous testing is important. And one of the ways to do that is use the Playwright config TS I showed you earlier, except I add a few more attributes to wire up that Alex Neo's tool. One is, what is your DevOps org name? That's important. What's the test plan? Every plan has an ID. What is the test plan ID? I could do comma, 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 and test my entire suite this way. And also, I want to know what the project is. This is just called eShop. And lastly is, what do you want to capture with this? I want to capture video. I want to capture screenshots. I want the trace file. And you put this in the config file so that when this automation runs, everything just works. Now, I did hard code a URL here. Again, as options, you can hard code it. You can not hard code it. You can use the page however you like. So when the test runs for each page, I only have to put the URL in once. And then here's that 11185 one we're going to run. And in the CI/CD pipeline. So jumping up to that, now I'm using Azure DevOps pipelines. And one of the stages is this run these Playwright tests. So after the app's built and deployed, infrastructure stood up, I want to run Playwright tests. And what that basically will do is install the dependencies I need, installs Playwright, the browsers I need, and then starts parallelizing the test suites for me, and then it'll run all the tests. Collect all the information from it, the output, and then upload that back into test plans where I can look at the test runs, which we're going to see in just a second. So in this particular example, if you read it, it says it's about 97% passed or so. Now, this is the output of the pipeline. So we can see it ran 48 tests across one worker, right? We don't know how long that took just yet. And it ran all the tests, and if they fail, it doesn't matter. This is the output. I can go into my test step and look at the output. When something fails, of course, is when I go and investigate that. We have to go look at that. And then, of course, the tool will actually publish the results up into test plans. That is that glue that's really important. Wouldn't happen without that. So publish the results. So what about the testing results themselves? Now, if you're using Azure DevOps pipelines, you'll know there's a lot of different results in the test runs. So I'm running, again, Azure DevOps pipelines. I get test results. So keep in mind, these test results are looking at my unit testings that are run, all the UI, the Playwright tests that are run, the integration tests that are run, 122 of them or so across time. Generally speaking, at 99%, a little bit over. Across and on average, it takes about 4 minutes to run this whole pipeline. So that's not bad. Also tells me which specific tests they're running. And out of the tests that are running, which ones are actually failing. So, right, we have one that's failing. It'd be nice to be able to click it and drill in on this test report. Now we're sitting in Azure DevOps at this moment. When you click the failing test, you'll get that stack trace. You'll get the elements you'll need. You'll get the code that's failed on, the lines of code, et cetera, in the Playwright test itself. So very helpful to find broken tests. You also get a nice view of the pass rate. So how, on this test run itself, what's the average pass rate? These are pretty high numbers, which is pretty nice. There's a few there that just didn't quite complete really well, but that's okay. And then you get another high-level view of just the Playwright tests. So I have 48 of those that ran. We get a nice run summary of the tests themselves. So at any point in time, I can run in here. I can go look at the test results. So I can look at the line of test results from the Playwright runs. Again, remember, this is all hooked up CI/CD, so it just runs automatically. And then I can see that broken test again. And then basically, it will show me that same call stack, but I'm in DevOps to do that now. Now, what's nice if you're in an Azure DevOps team working together, I can take this information from that test run, and maybe I'm not going to fix it right now, but I'm going to put it in a queue to be fixed using if you're using Azure Boards, let's say. So you can very easily take that, click one button, and create this bug. This is what we call a rich bug. So this bug is full of the repo resteps. It has the video recordings. It has the screenshots added to it. I can assign it to somebody, and the bug is now linked back to the test case itself as the parent inside of Azure DevOps. Very nice, right, for traceability purposes. Works really well. A few more other analytics on the pipeline run. So if you have an automated pipeline run or so, it's this test pass rate 90%, still pretty good. And that provides, again, a high-level overview. At some point, we'd investigate that. What's nice about this is you can actually see there's one or two or a few tests that like constantly fail or whatnot. We can go investigate those things. So that's what's going on here. So Azure DevOps Test Plans also has a progress report. So again, QA teams I've worked with in the past like this report. It really, at a high level, shows what it looks like. It shows the progress of the report itself. Again, keeping track of test runs per sprint and whatnot. And that will show the plan you're actually testing, how many points it's worth, what's the run rate, 36% in this case, and we have a 95% pass rate. So this is considered pretty good. And we also can see the actual track and trace across the tests. You can actually change that drop-down upper right corner. I just picked 30 days, but you can pick 7 or 14 days and figure out where you're drilling into. So red's not good. We want to get rid of the red, ideally. And then we can also drill down to the bottom and see, importantly, like which test plan has which test suites and which test cases. I can peel that all open, double-click into each one. And then we can actually see there's some column headings here. One is the not run count on the right. So if you have not run count, maybe it's not automated. Maybe they didn't run it. To keep track of which tests ran and failed are one thing, but to keep track of which ones didn't run at all is a nice feature. And that's part of, again, Azure DevOps Test Plans. So testing at scale. So we have our CI/CD pipelines, which is great. We can run those, and everything's fed back into Azure DevOps. As you saw, as a real team would have many, hundreds or thousands of test cases, running them on a single worker, on a runner, even if you're using GitHub workflows, you're still on a single runner, unless you're paying for extra ones. There is enter the Microsoft Playwright testing service. This is in preview right now. You can sign up for it and play with it. It's not private preview like it was a while ago. So you can actually sign up for it, and I'll show you how that works. I want to walk through that, how it works and how it looks. What is it? It's the ability to scale your web testing in a nutshell to allow you to speed the CI validation. So this service can distribute tests across multiple browsers at the same time. It can distribute tests across multiple OSs at the same time. It will run all the different tests that you have set up. and allows you to capture everything that we talked about so far at the same time, all at once, which is pretty awesome. Very, very high for parallelization across tests when you're trying to scale out, and that's the idea with the service. So going back to our pipeline, the stage I have underneath the manual test case is called the service test. That's the one that's highlighted right now. If you look closely, if you can see it in the back, the testing service took that same batch of tests and ran it in, what, a minute? Just almost 2 minutes, just under 2 minutes. Where the one above it was almost 9.5 minutes for the same exact set of tests. Interesting. So how do you set up the service? The service itself, basically, when you get into the preview service, you have to pick a workspace. I just called it Playwright. So you just build a workspace, quite easy. It'll assign you an Azure data center location. East US is what I'm using. And you basically will tell you about, hey, you need to tie this to one of your subscriptions, which I have. So that's the easy part. The next thing you need to do is set up an access key, this Playwright service access token, they call it. So again, easy peasy, you set up a token like any other token, set an expiration date, make sure you save it because you'll never see it again. That token is very important to communicate the results back into the pipeline that you're running out of DevOps, the DevOps pipeline. So we need that token. And then other information, a couple other setup guides you can put in the service itself. For instance, I need to install the Playwright testing service locally. So I run that basically at my terminal, easy peasy, right? And then I need to grab the proper URL that assigned me. So my East US data center, it has to know which data center I'm in. And basically the other setup gives you a little example of how to use it. I'm going to show you that in the pipeline. I grab those tokens and I have to go into my pipeline now. So I'm in my Azure DevOps pipeline. I set up 2 variables. One is the access token I need. And the second one, of course, is the service URL I'm using as well. So that URL is the East data center in a nutshell. And then I can actually configure my pipeline now to use those variables. So this is a DevOps pipeline. And it's easy just enough to basically reference the variables in the pipeline here like this. And then the last piece is when I run it's one line, I run the service. There's a difference here. If you look really close, there is the Playwright config TS file for local. There's the Playwright service config TS file for running services across up in the data center. I also can configure the number of workers I want. Just for laughs, I did 40. Pick a number. I picked 40. Eventually, it'll start costing my subscription something. But and then, of course, we run the test. So this is the Playwright the Playwright CI/CD pipeline I have here. You can see here it ran 48 tests against 40 workers. Almost every test gets its own worker, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, it runs all the tests very, very fast. If you watch this in the test log as the pipeline's running, this happens really fast. And then, of course, the results get published as soon as it happens. It hits the back. This isn't a service, so it actually updates all the run information from the service itself. And attaches the whatever, it's a screenshots or video recordings. The service does all that for you just like we saw locally. So what about reporting? Now that we have the testing service running, and it's all hooked up and all automated with every change we do, the service will run all the time. How do we look at its results? Because those results aren't part of the test run and part of the pipeline. So Microsoft provides this nice dashboard for me to go look at my reporting test results. I can very easily see which ones passed, which ones failed. I can even see how many workers each test ran across. You can make that a variable and run it across a number of workers and how long it took. So I get a nice, easy to use dashboard. And then I have some filtering at the top. I can look at the pass, failed, flaky tests, things like that. And then I could zero in, of course, like any other dashboard. I only want to look at the ones that are failing because those is where I'd start and fix. So in this particular test case here, again, remember everything happened in the cloud. So now where's all that information? I can click it and drill in. And the testing service provides a lot of rich data and information as well, providing the test case, the steps, the repro steps you have. Again, video recording is important. What did it look like when it failed? Or what the screenshot looked like? That's usually what people want to see is what did it look like when it actually failed? Because that can't be right. And it'll actually even tell you what it was looking for and what it didn't find. So it provides that information for me as well. And then the actual step. So it's going along and it breaks at a specific step. I can click on just the step itself and then pull in what did that step look like visually on the screen. Screenshots are captured automatically. The video is captured automatically as well. So again, this testing service is a preview. You can sign up for it, play with it if you're into the Playwright world. I don't know the cost of it at the moment, but that's okay. A couple extra little goodies here I want to add in is usually get asked about authentication. So using Azure authentication, how do I do this with apps, right? It's generally a good idea to store creds or your passwords and whatnot into variables. Maybe secret management if you're using a pipeline, or Azure Key Vault if you're using, or any vault really. But store those passwords there, and then we can access them from Playwright itself using the process.end or $. It depends on where you're coming from. But the takeaway of this is you store them in a vault somewhere. The other thing, if you're doing local development and you want to test things out, so I have one of my tests logs in as an admin and runs tests as an admin. I just store those in a variable, basically. But you can actually store them in VS Code locally in the .env file, which allows you to access those. I put together a quick comparison here. Like I said, I used to do Selenium a long time ago. So Playwright is it's kind of a rapidly growing right now. It's a Microsoft built from and supported by Microsoft, and again, it's maintained there. They have their own, obviously, their support group as well. It is very similar to other protocols here. The idea with Playwright, again, it's very resilient for running tests and easy to work with. So I found it pretty nice. I put together some resources here as well on the slide. If you were to get the slides later, the Playwright testing service is here as well. Playwright.dev is the homepage for Playwright if you're interested. They always keep it up to date as far as installing it. You could also do it basically locally in your terminal. Just say Playwright update install, and it updates the installs for you. The slides themselves I put on my web page here. How are we doing on time? Oh, good. And if you go to the Pagels /talks, this slide deck is there now. Again, hit me up on LinkedIn. Love to hear. Even if you can share a story of your Playwright experiences, I'd love to hear that. So every customer I've ever worked with that has a large battery of QA and tests, they have thousands and thousands of test cases. None of them are automating them. They have people that test manually still, constantly. So anyway, I'd like to hear stories. I think I am right at time with 3 minutes to spare. Awesome. So again, thank you for choosing. I know I'm between you and the movie and popcorn, but it's all good. So I can't see, but if you have any questions, feel free to come on up. Thank you.